where to start. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob. Your griot, here to tell you a story. So, as of May 18th, it was my 4th-year anniversary, and anniversaries are a good vehicle to give you a point in time to measure what's going on, right? We do this with holidays. We do this with events like 9/11, bombing of Pearl Harbor. And most of those are self-imposed by the power structure because it gives them a narrative that they can define reality. Right? And a good one is the timeline that we've only been around for 16,000 years, and really culture's only been around 6,000 years. And no, there is plenty of evidence that that's not true. You know, um, and the institutions. When I was in universities, well, I never wanted to be I was a scholar rather than wanted to be a tenured professor, right? So, I just watched a bunch of things that are pretty interesting. And boop, boop, boop. Mm. New discoveries? Maybe that's it.
We, the people of the United States, we've moved so far away from the Constitution that in many ways we don't even recognize. We think that we're becoming more advanced by abandoning the Constitution and adopting something like an administrative state. But what we're in fact doing is becoming more primitive. We are regressing.
The founders were trying to create a regime of liberty, which would be the greatest possible private scope of freedom, while at the same time being based upon the basic moral principles of the natural law and natural.
It is from within this context, the context of a lost ancient high technology civilization, that the contradictions evident in megalithic architecture could be explained, and the enigma of obviously high technology objects could be fully investigated and solved. Yet, despite this deluge of new evidence, our tenured academics and the textbooks in the field of history are very slow to change, if not outrightly hostile towards any new ideas. In many ways, the story of history is very similar to a religious dogma, as ultimately it's just a story, and its high priests of archaeology and Egyptology only really derive their authority from the mainstream acceptance of this story. If questioning this dogmatic version of history is heresy, then this is a label that I happily accept, and I consider this channel to be something of the modern-day heretics toolkit. Many others are also on this path, authors, researchers, fellow content creators. And I think a slow awakening is actually happening as more
This
and
site
more
is
people realize
called
that it's
New
high time we
Discoveries
reevaluated
that
and
completely
re-examined the story
alter
of our
human
past.
history.
You will find content on
suggest
this
go
channel
watch
that
it.
explores many aspects of this debate, from the cataclysms of the Ice Age and looking at new scientific evidence, to investigations of ancient sites and the search for evidence of ancient high technology. My hope is to spread some awareness of this debate, to get more people interested in uncovering our real history, and above all, to get people captivated by the true mystery and wonder that awaits those who wish to visit the astonishing ancient places that are still left to us around the world. I want us to heed the warnings that are transmitted from ancient civilizations, warnings that are indicated by the astronomical alignment of so many of their structures and written into so many of their stories. We need to understand the dangers that lurk in the cosmic environment of our future, as ultimately I believe that our priorities as a species need to change if we hope to survive in the longer term and eventually propagate ourselves into the stars. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of After School, who I want to say a
After
huge
School.
thank you to for their excellent work in this collaboration. I'm Ben from the Uncharted X channel, and I've been traveling, researching, and filming for many years now. So if you're interested in the topics covered in this video, I explore many of these mysteries in depth over at the Uncharted X channel, from new scientific work uncovering the cataclysms of the Ice Age to the evidence for lost civilizations and ancient forms of high technology. I've also had the privilege to both travel with and interview many of the experts that work in these fields, figures who should be familiar to after-school viewers, guys like Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock. You can find those discussions on my YouTube channel as well as on the Uncharted X audio podcast. The links to both of those are below. I hope you enjoyed the video, and many thanks for watching.
So that's a good place to start, But last night I had a dream. And one reason why did I name this channel Dreamy Dreamland, right? Why? Because back in 1977, when I went to Australia with my training wife, Don Ann, the great photographer, and she is the best. I'm just a historian who takes pictures, I'm just a scholar with a throwaway camera. But she is, the best. So we flew to go visit a good friend of mine who was the, comic genius of Australia, Neil Curtis. And, we just had a visa for 6 months. We ended up there 3.5 years. And all the time I worked for the government of Australia, first working in the Avant-Garde Theatre of Australia with Punch Hawks and Circus Oz and the Black Box Theatres in Melbourne. And then I was sent because I got involved with Aboriginal land rights, and Australia was pushing to have the Olympics in Sydney, and rest of the world was going, oh, yeah, they're just criminals down there, which they are, but most people didn't realize how criminal. And if you go watch, Max Igon, he'll give you a good taste, right? I don't know what happened to Max. I haven't seen him lately. He had to run away to Mexico, and so we are experiencing this, big splat that I call it, rebranding, restart, however you want to put it. And it has, really been going on since Christopher Columbus got here. And the Pope of that time gave a papal bull, which was, a document that stated that white European Christians could go to any place in the earth, now that we discovered that it's round, and take other people's stuff. Just take it, kill them, Coming into North and Central and South America, Europeans killed off 600 million indigenous people, right? When, Europeans went to Australia, they killed off the Aborigines. When we went to Tasmania, which is a little island at the very southerly part of Australia, and the next stop is, South Pole. It's a beautiful place, greener than green, and we landed and we went, into the capital city. And there was their museum, and we went into that before we went over and visited with the friends we were going to stay with. And there was in the lobby a stuffed Aboriginal woman who had a baby in its arms, which was stuffed, and she had a bullet hole right in her head. And the baby its head was crushed like a watermelon, right? And later that night, Don had she was triple cancer, really super, super sensitive. And the rest of the world told her that she was nuts. Me, I said, no, no, honey, this is just your ability. You just have to lean into it and let me help you out with that, right? So I'm going to let you help yourself out with that by watching this. Breathe nice and deep. I'm going to count to 3. And as I do, you're going to go deeper and deeper into a state of relaxation to where you are in the dreamy dream state, where you are in the lobby of this museum and you are seeing that stuffed woman with a bullet hole in her head and her baby's head crushed in her arms. And 1, your conscious mind is totally asleep. You're focused on your breath, filling your lungs with all that prana, life force, which gives you the alchemical energy to travel anywhere in time and space. And here we are doing it right here live on the internet. And I am pushing this shamanic energy throughout the whole World Wide Web. Right? So you can see the dreams I've had last night, and you can start off with seeing this dream of this woman. So we went through that museum, and it was just a heralding of the white Anglo-Saxon male coming and conquering and destroying the world around, right? Yeah, I'm serious, because I had these pretty amazing dreams last night. Dreamy dreamland, right? So I'm telling you where that name came from. It came from this experience, right? And so Don was a little agitated. We then travel on to the folks that we were going to stay with, and it was a friend of Neil's who was a very beautiful artist in her 60s, kind of grandma-ish, very sweet, and she opened her house to us, and she let us stay up in her guest bedroom that had kid beds in it, and we were squished in these little kid things. And Don was like, I'm really agitated, and I said, hon, what's up? "Arr." And then we go to sleep, and we have this dream. I want you to see it now, see it now, see it now. There we were, surrounded by fire. All of Tasmania is on fire. All the Tasmanian, why they call them Tasmanian devils, because when white people went down there and they tried to kill the Aborigines before they could lift their gun, they were gone. Right? And so the way the white Anglo-Saxon murderers decided to do this, you have to realize they call it a prison colony. Well, sending a pickpocket from London to Australia is like sending someone to Mars today, right? For that, the people they sent were really, really rich, powerful people who were sociopaths. Like Jack the Ripper was the Queen of England's cousin. He was the surgeon of the court, and his hobby was cutting up prostitutes down in the north side. But as long as he stuck to that, not a problem. But then he started cutting up, middle class women who were out shopping. That politically didn't work. So they just put him on a boat and sent him to. So all the people, like Reginald Ansett and Rupert Murdoch and all of the major industries and businesses, the banking, the politics, is owned by the Queen of England, just like she owns England and Canada and New Zealand and a whole bunch of other, the Falkland Islands and a bunch of other places, right? And why do they go to the Falkland Islands, right? Now, in Dreamy Dreamtime, you can see all of this because it cuts away whatever belief structure, right? You don't even have to suspend your disbelief. If you go into Dreamy Dreamtime, you see it clearly. And there we were in these kids' beds in Tasmania, and I kept having this dream where I was that woman, fire all around, boom, brains blown out, falling into the water and drowning and crushing my baby, and a white man kicking me over with boots and slamming a sledgehammer into my baby's head. Right? and boom, back up, fire everywhere. Boom, shot in my brain. Boom, pulling up on my baby. Boot kicking me over. Bam, sledgehammer in baby's head. Over and over and over and over again. And when we woke up, it was a beautiful day. It was like sun shining through. The birds were tweeting. But we couldn't move. Every muscle in our body was traumatized. And I still have, when I wake up, like that trauma stayed in my body all the way till today. And in the mornings when I have to wake up and I'm like, it, stems from that trauma, right? I understood it. I shamanically worked on it, we used it as a vehicle to awake ourselves, like Buddha. And anyway, we came downstairs to breakfast, and the smell of bacon and eggs and coffee and biscuits that she had cooked. She looks at us. We're like, and she goes, "Oh, you've had the dream," And she tells us that everyone has that dream when they are upset. If they go to sleep upset, they have that dream. That's why no one, who is awake in Tasmania goes to bed, upset. They work it out before they go to bed, so they don't have that dream. So you're there, right? The fire is everywhere around you. Then you feel the person out in the dark pulling the trigger and the bullet coming towards you, and you're trying to change dimensionally, but you can't do it fast enough, and your brains are blown out the back of your head. Feel it now. Feel that now. Feel it now. And then you fall on top of your beloved baby and drown it with your body's weight in the water because you were trying to escape the fire. You were trying to run into the sea so you could dimensionally go somewhere else. See it now. See it now. See it now. And that's what 2012 was. The end of the, Mayan calendar, the Piscean age of getting what you want through violence and going into the Aquarian age, which is getting what you need through understanding and love's co-creation. And I understood this at that time. And about a year later, after doing all kinds, I came back. I talked to Punch. We had this thing called Circus Oz. We traveling around Asia and doing a circus, but doing it with a political edge, right? And so, my bent was anthropology. So wherever we went, whatever little town in Australia, whatever city, I was I knew that the Aborigines were there. I saw this movie called The Last Wave, right? Right. Very, very, very interesting. And I had an experience flying to Australia from LA, from Hawaii to Sydney, right at the, between the northern and southern hemisphere. I kind of gauged it out, and I went into the toilet, the John, the toilet John, the John of the toilet, Johnny's toilet, the WC water closet, whatever name you want to put it, the John that has the blue goo in it and has a little button. You do your business, the turd's hanging in there, and you hit the button and it starts swirling around and it goes down, right? And I didn't put a turd into it. I just looked at it, pushed the button, and it started swirling clockwise, and then it slowed down. And my thumb was on the button, right? For 5, 10, I don't know how many minutes, but I was mesmerized by the swirl of the John. And it went swirl, 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 slowed down, slowed down, slowed down. It was like I was being hypnotized. I was being hypnotized. And it stopped and it went the other way, right? And then I was just like, and then bam, 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 bam. Sir, are you okay? Burp, bam, bam, bam. And then click, the door opens up. And, I'm standing there with my finger on the button. And the woman takes my hand and pulls it off the button and goes, sir. And I go, huh? Sir. And she doesn't slap me, but she kind of jostles me around. Sir, you were looking at the swirl of the John, right? Of the toilet, right? Of the shithole, right? and you knew that we were going from the southern hemisphere into northern. You wanted to see the water swirl change. And I said, uh and so she goes, "Come with me, sir." And so she takes me back to my seat and she puts me there and she goes and gets me a blanket and like swaddles me and puts a little pillow on my head and puts a little pillow on Don's head and throws a blanket over her. And she goes, "What kind of whiskey do you like?" I said, "Irish." And so she brought a bunch, like a 12 pack of that and a couple glasses of ice. And she goes, "What kind of soda do you want?" I said, "Ginger ale." And she gave us about 6 cans and she left it there in a little bag and at my feet. And she goes, "Just drink this slowly. We have another 4 hours to go and you're in shock." And I said, "What?" I said, "Well, you've just had a psychic shock. You understood the dynamic, but you didn't really know it. You didn't feel it. You just," and she tells me that I've just gone into dream time. I've heard this term before, and but I never experienced it. And so, you know, I'm not a teetotaler, but I'm not a drinker, right? My mom's family are Irish and they have issues with alcohol. So I gotten drunk a few times saying, not doing this. So I take that, put it in ice cubes, and before I know it, I drank the whole thing. I said, and then did another one, you know. And by that time, I was having a pretty good buzz, and Don was kind of cuddling up to me like a cat, right? And so I kind of fell back asleep, and and I was fitful, right? And the I kind of woke up, and I had tears rolling down my face, and a woman goes, "Are you okay?" And I go, "I don't know." She goes, "What were you just dreaming?" She goes, I said, "I saw a woman in her legs in the water and fire all around. And I was that woman. And then I got shot in the head. And then I fell on top of my baby. And then a man with big boots came and kicked me over and smashed my baby's head in with a sledgehammer." And then I started to sob. And she says, "Here, take this." And she gave me that's, something to knock me out. I don't know what it was, but little blue pill. And I took the blue pill and I knocked it down with, she filled up a glass, and with a new glass of ice. She had brought some ice, and I just took it down, right? And I had 2 in me, and I cuddled up with Don, and then I saw Vietnam, and I saw that iconic photo of that little girl, right? Running out of a hamlet on fire from napalm, and her clothes had burnt off, and she was totally naked, and she was glistening because her skin had burned off to the point where the fascia underneath was, that gooey stuff was there, and she was screaming. And I was a U.S. Navy medic, corpsman, and I was with a Marine company that was with a English TV company, right? And they were there. We were just, they were shooting, what it is to go out in the bush with, the Marines, and finding this. And there were Vietnamese attack aircraft, and they first, we noticed it. We were about, I don't know, 4 or 5 clicks out from this hamlet, and we heard the explosion, right? And the guy got on the radio and said, "Hey, did his radio thing," and it wasn't an American. Um, they looked at who was bombing what, and it was a Vietnamese um, aircraft, propeller aircraft, ground attack aircraft, the best that we could build for the Second World War and the Korean War. I forgot what kind it is, but it's like it's their version of the A-10, right? And it would be 2 to 4 aircraft, one with 500-pound or 200-pound bombs to concuss, blow everything apart, and then the other one to come in with napalm and burn it up, and one above covering the air, and another one um, that still had more napalm to come in and toast whatever it needed to be toast that was left over. And this little girl was running towards us, and I caught her, and she just slid through my arms and fell down. And then the dirt on the ground covered her oozing body. And then I was transported to the Cherokee Long March, Trail of Tears. And I was a old man walking, from Tennessee out to the Midwest. And it got colder and colder, and the blankets we had made us sick that were given to us by the Army. And I died, and I was left. The Army was forcing everyone to keep marching. As people died, forget them, keep going. And I fell, and I was, my daughter was with me crying, and my grandchildren were there crying. And this horse soldier came and just trampled them, and me too. And then I was a black man in a Midwestern town. I had a relatively prosperous pharmacy, general store kind of place. It had the pharmacy in the back. It had a counter where you could get something to eat, and everything else was all kinds of interesting things and stuff you might need in your house, from hardware to clothes to other interesting things. And I was quite, doing well. And I didn't picture it until later when I woke up this morning that I was a person in that place that was known as the Black American Black Wall Street. And I was in there, and there were a bunch of kids, and I was making them sundaes, and it was a beautiful day. And then all of a sudden, the smell of something burning, and I didn't know what it was. And then all of a sudden, a car went by, and they had a machine gun. I don't know what caliber, what kind it was. A Tommy gun was but it racked the whole store with rapid fire shots, and I hit the ground, and then fire was all around. Someone had thrown a Molotov cocktail through the broken window from the bullets, and I got up, and the children were all hit by the gunshots, and some had their heads blown off, and the fire. I was on the other side, and the counter was made out of marble, so the front was marble, the top was marble, and I went behind it. And the Molotov cocktail came, and the kids had been shot first, and then the Molotov cocktail came in, and they were all burning. There's nothing I could do but run outside. And as I ran outside, there was a crowd that grabbed me and beat me and dragged me and then lynched me. And then I was a Chinese woman um, in Chicago, and the announcement of um, you know Pearl Harbor was on the radio, and I was outside a store, and I walked out, and some men. It was in the early evening, and some men grabbed me, threw me in a car, drove me to some place, and raped me 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 till I was dead. And then they skinned me and dropped me off in front of my parents' house because I had my ID in my handbag. And those were the dreams, and just a few that I had um, last night. I've been talking about the big splat. I've been talking about, you have to, get above, what John as the canary in the coal mine is. That's why I'm wearing this yellow. And so, and it's coming fast and furious, right? And it's all around. You can't hide from it by being a born again Christian. A few days ago, I was in one of my holler spots and I hadn't gone on live chat yet. I wish I had, because I went in there and it was me, and they have this table set aside for me. It's kind of right in the window. It's you know a banquette rather than chairs. It's nice and cushy, and a big table, and I can spread out, and no one likes to sit there. And when it's hot day, there's a air conditioning duct right there, so you stay cool. And there's another one right next to it that doesn't have it, so if it's cold outside, I can go sit next to the other side there. Hey there, Sandra. There's Anthony up there. Now, we're not talking about Anthony. We're not just talking about Egypt. We're talking about what's in front of us. And one of the reasons what's going on is that we're about to, you know, do the same old same, another rebranding of a big splat, and it's usually coordinated with things that are happening. Meaning, if you look, I played that little video in the beginning to give you guys a heads up. That guy, it's after school, or play that first part up there, and you'll see what channel he is, and he's very good. I watched other things, but he talks about our history and how it's a hoax, right? And that there is severe scientific evidence that the thing that wiped out the dinosaurs, that wasn't the only one. There were others that there was one in Tutuscus, Russia, in the early 20th century. It wasn't a gigantic rock, but it was big enough to vaporize 1,000 square miles of Russia tundra. And the explosion came from, it didn't come sideways, it came straight down. Explosion was so intense that before it burned everything, it pushed the trees into the ground, and the ground was soft, right? It was that tundra-ish, gooey, muddy, boggy kind of thing, and then because it was all carbon, it caught fire. And so and because it was cold and moist and wet, it burned ferociously for a day or two, and then it kind of seceded and put itself out. But it was a big event. Nobody was there. Maybe 100 people died who were just kind of camping or living in a hut. But that shows that in the 20th century that occurred, right? Well, back 12,000 years ago, something very similar occurred, and occurred up there where the ice sheets were. And it was quite larger. I mean, big earthquakes, volcanoes, things were rocking and rolling. not quite as big as the gigantic rock the size of Manhattan that hit, in the Gulf of Mexico. And it basically melted all that ice, and that's where the story of the big flood occurred, right? And it raised almost instantly the the sea level by 200-300 feet. That's why you go hiking to the Blue Ridge Mountains. You find um, shells because that big wave washed over all of North America, even the Rockies, right? But here in the Blue Ridge Mountains in New England, um, which are really the continuation of the Appalachian, you know, you'll find things from the sea there. So um, this evidence is very clear, and a lot of people have, Mr. Hancock and others have really done excellent job. But the priests of the status quo, the scholastics, oh, they're wrong, they're wrong. Even though these guys have the evidence and have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of peer-reviewed you know research papers showing what it is, like the Sphinx in Egypt, right? Guy's a geologist, digs down to the base, and he had to go through a lot because Egyptians didn't want him to do this, and they knew about it, and he goes down to their base and sees that the foundation had been surrounded by water, and not just the rivers, but this was a wet place when that was built. So that means the you know Sphinx had been around more than 16,000 years. And the Egyptologists say that our culture started in Mesopotamia and Sumeria 6,000 years ago. Otherwise, we were just hunter and gatherers, and we went from just being happy hunter and gatherers for about 6 to 12,000 years to bango, having this an amazing culture and technology like this. The folk who say they know say that folk at that time did not have the technology to quarry granite. Well, the pyramids are all made out of granite, and they're cut in such a way that we can't even cut it today, right? The technological, architectural aspects of the pyramids we can't reproduce with all our whoop-de-doo. So the idea that we started down here as cavemen, and then did this nice little march up to where we're so whoop-de-doo. No, we are still cavemen, right? We are worse than the cavemen, right? Cavemen were at least aware of who they were and where what they were doing. Not today. Right? So Dreamy Dreamland came from that experience of Australia, of the flight from, you know, and a flight from Hawaii to Sydney. Its number was 007. I thought that was cute, and I was, never the same after that. Right now, I've been sharing this through my art and everything I've done. I mean, all my social activism, everything I've done is in respect to this, because the one thing I was left when I woke up, because when I woke up, the last thing I saw was the World Trade Center coming down, and I had worked on that, you know, oh, 8 years before as a local 3 IBEW journeyman electrician. You know, Greenlee taught me how to use a Greenlee 0910 uh, pipe bender, and it was this thing that you put anything larger than 2-inch galvanized onto this thing, and had these knobs and these little dials, and you had to think the math in your head so you could set these little dials, hit a button, and the thing would bend this piece of pipe, with a 90 and an offset and a this and a that, which you could never do with just a horseshoe, right? And to be that perfect. Whereas you take a piece of pipe, you take a magic marker, put 2 marks in the end, set it in this place, and I had this cut sheet of all the bends I had to make, and how many, and I would set the little dials to that, and then hit the button, and then they would turn off, one, and I would give it, send it up to where it was supposed to be done, and if it fit perfectly, I would knock off another 10 or 15 or 20, and that was the beauty of this machine. You could, like in a factory, knock off, you know, band after band after band. That was perfect, and as soon as you got that template one, okay, that works. I had a little radio, like way up there. I'd wait maybe 10, 15 minutes and say, yep, that works. Knock them off. So I would knock off however many more they wanted of that. And then they would take them up. And that's how the World Trade Center was built in that way. And so the most concrete steel buildings, what they do is they have the foundation, they set steel into it, and then they build a floor of concrete and rebar and whatever else is going on the floor, and then put more steel on top of that steel, and then they go up that. But that takes time. And the World Trade Center was built, basically more than half of it was built off-site in a factory. And the World Trade Center, the two towers, those buildings were cased. If you ever see a picture of it, see this gleaming aluminum thing, and the windows are very narrow, right? Less than a foot, right? And the gleaming aluminum is like, 2.5, 3 feet wide, right? And what it was is it was these whole portions of the walls made in a factory, big crane on top. They delivered it in a flatbed truck. It would lift it up, place it in its place. They would put rebar in there that would go into and inside the steel of these walls. They were all boxes, right? And they were boxes that were like, I think, somewhere about 2 foot by 2 foot. And the steel was at least 4 inches thick, case hardened steel, not crappy steel, almost stainless steel. And they were hollow on the inside. And what they would do is they would lower this down, and there would be, from the last setting, they would have a rebar that was like 2 inches thick, standing up and being higher, like 12 or 15 or 20 feet, however long these chunks were. And they were set in the concrete of the last set that was in there. And they had been welded to the other piece of rebar before it was filled with concrete. And then they would lower this thing down. It had this, the one they were setting it on was a little bit in. And so the walls would just fit perfectly and have about 1.5 feet of this sock that would fit onto. And the rebar would be sticking up and out about 2 feet from there. And so there were holes that they would put rivets in, and then they would weld it, right, all the way around. And then they would attach rebar and weld it to that for the next set, and then they would pour concrete in. And they went around, and by the time they came around, that concrete was set, so they put the next one on. So they would, and then at each place where there was a floor, in these big steel things that were the cage, that's what they call it, the cage, was these steel ledges that went out, and they could put, what they would put is steel on that, which would cross the thing, and then they would put corrugated aluminum on that, right? And then they had holes that large rebar, like 2 inches thick, would fit through this way and would go out maybe 20 feet, lying on that, because what the aluminum was the floor you worked on, right? And so you basically then made this lattice of rebar, and then on top of that, you put these mats of rebar and welded it to the big heavy rebar, right? And then whatever plumbing pipes, electric pipes, you just sat there and had them stub out to wherever they were going to go. And then another thing of rebar and another thing of mats with about 4 feet space between it, and they did that twice, and then they pour super duper re-stressed concrete, right? And the floors were about 4 foot thick of this steel rebar, steel matted rebar, pipes and everything in it, and then 4 feet of this super stressed concrete, which they like, right? And then they pour the concrete and they have these vibrator things. So all the concrete would be 100% solid piece of concrete. They x-rayed them to make sure that they were done right before they settled down. And, then they put another decking on top of that so you could work on that, right? And that was the floor. So no way. First of all, it was designed so two 707s could fly into the World Trade Center, and they would smash on the outside because the back in the 20s or 30s, a U.S. Air Force, Army Air Force B-25 flew into the Empire State Building, and because the outside of the Empire State Building was so strong, the airplane it smashed into it, but the majority of the aircraft was sticking out. Right, didn't make it into. It was flying about 200 miles an hour. Bang! Right, it was a foggy night. Bang! Right into it. They were trying to find LaGuardia. They smashed in the Empire State Building. So, with that understanding that airplanes can fly into these tall buildings, the World Trade Center was designed was called the cage, not to let aircraft, and you have to realize that commercial aircraft like 707, 747, 767, 77, they are just aluminum thermoses with wings on them, right? And they're flying through the air, right? Because they can't be super duper, strong because they'd weigh a ton. You couldn't, get off the ground. So they really don't weigh. They're just a thermos, very thin. And so when that airplane went into the World Trade Center, if it was there at all, it, you know, crushed on the outside and would fall down, right? And, one of those 767 was supposed to have flown into the Pentagon. And the place where it flew into was the day before 9/11. Rumsfeld came out because there was a story in the Times that the Defense Department had lost $2.5 trillion in the last 18 months, meaning the 8 months of um, the George W. Bush and Dick Cheney administration, and about 8 months of Bill Clinton. Right, where'd that 2 point something trillion dollars go? And how could you spend that kind of money that in less than 18 months and not know where it went? So Rumsfeld, well, we have all the receipts, and we're gonna have the people who know how to figure out where this. And we've just redone the section of the Pentagon, and there's nobody there, and we have all all the receipts, all the data transcripts, all the everything, and we're going to get to the bottom of next date 9/11. Where does the airplane allegedly fly into? The Pentagon was right in that section where they had all those people. The 130 people died in Pentagon were all the bean counters who knew exactly where all the bodies were buried. They never did. All the receipts and all the data was gone, right? And then you look at picture. I mean, here's the Pentagon, right? And they do not have any video of the airplane hitting it, right? All they have is some blurry thing from a gas station 2 miles away. I mean, this is a Pentagon, meaning your average Walmart's has more video cameras than that portion of, and no one ever answered that question. And but soon as the buildings got hit in New York, people they closed down airspace. They were looking for stuff, and bingo, soon as they saw it coming towards the Pentagon, they were trying to get people out of the way, but not those 430 people. No one told them, and bango, right? There was no picture of the airplane going into the building. And when people got there, relative before the firemen showed up, before anybody, people were there because you have to realize all the way around the Pentagon is like a park. It's beautiful. It's with trees and grass and all the rest. And people can go to a certain level. There's a road comes on one side or the other side. You can. There's no big fence, or was none, and you can park and people did, and they ran there, and because they wanted to see if they could help. People had cameras and their phones, and they basically they had a picture of a hole about 4 foot big. Well, 767 sure would have, doing about 200 and something miles an hour would definitely have smashed a way bigger hole, and it would have left stuff outside. Parts of the airplane, like the big tail, would have probably snapped off. No, the big wings. No, big engines, right, which are the heaviest things on that aircraft. 767, those big GE engines. No, they didn't find any of the aircraft in that building or around it. They didn't mention that. You know. Now we have some. The government has some amazing national laboratories. They have the laboratories of measures and standards. They had a whole bunch of technology they could go to, and they could have done a forensic. The FBI, the NCI. There are lots of forensic investigation things of our government. Didn't use any of them. You know who the scientific arm of the investigation of that was? Popular mechanics. Not even popular science, popular mechanics. They're the ones who put out what happened, right? So there I am on an airplane in 1976, and the last dream I have is that. And I am weeping and weeping and weeping. And we're about to come in, and I'm still kind of dragged out from the little blue pill that I was given, and the 4 bottles of Irish whiskey I drank, and I was crying, and Don was in my arms, and I was like showering her with my tears. And she kind of woke up, and "Are we here?" And she was all wet. She goes, What's going?" And she's covered up by blankets, and what's. And I'm crying, and she goes, "What, honey, what's wrong?" And I said, "I just had a really bad nightmare." So 77 to 2001, 2000, 9/11 would be, and it was right around September when we went. So that's like 77, 87, 97, 97 to, so that's 24 years, right? And I had the vivid dream of it. And then what would come next? So that's where Dreamy Dreamland came from. And my experience on that airplane woke me up to a place, not woke, but I was made aware, right, of what's going on. And I already knew what was going on. I had already been exposed to a lot of stuff, and knew it was, fake news, as Donnie would say. And the beauty of Donnie is that he lied so much that he told the truth. I mean, that was the unexpensive, the powers that be. People, who are all the scholastics I know who try to call me up and say, "What do you think of this?" And then like be scholastic about it and say, "Oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist." I said, "Well, conspiracy is when more than 2 people come together, do something they don't want other people to know. And theory is just an idea about it. So what's wrong with that?" I'm not saying this is what happened. But if you go to architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth on the internet, they have a website. If it hasn't been taken down, they had some really nice YouTubes about it. And they showed that the buildings were taken because that picture that just played over and over, where the buildings, both on it, fell down, and they were like a waterfall, because those buildings were made, a good chunk of those buildings were asbestos, right? And when the guy who bought the World Trade Center for like $6 million, he, and not just, but all 23 buildings, the whole footprint of the center, and building 7, everything. He bought it for, I mean, that was what he came up with. He was going to pay more. And then because of the terrorist attack that happened under Bill Clinton, and Bill Clinton was, his FBI basically was proven they're the guys who did it. And if they were true, Muslim radicals, and all those guys who did it, the Blind Sheikh and all the rest, were engineers, and they understood that the World Trade Center, both those towers, they first built this thing called the bathtub, which kept the Hudson River from flowing in, because underneath was the PATH trains, all the subways, and all of the trains that went west of New York, out to New Jersey, Philly, all the Amtrak stuff was right under. Plus, the New York Federal Reserve had their gold underneath that building, right? Which got robbed, went missing. Oops, what happened? No one, I mean, that scene from a Die Hard movie, when Willis and the black guy in the cab were riding all over the place looking for bombs when it was really just a heist of that bank. And that movie was like 4 or 5 years before 9/11. It's like they did exactly what that movie did, meaning when that building came down, and it came straight down, and that video just playing over and over and over, and it was like a waterfall of debris, and it wasn't like big chunks or anything. And yes, there were like boom, 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 boom going down. So see, look, it was no, that building was built like it was taken down by space-based energy weapons that turned the building from solid to dust, and then pushed it down into the hole so it wouldn't go and hit, right across the street was, Merrill Lynch, didn't hit that, just, did not. But what was interesting, about 2 blocks from World Trade Center, campus, I guess, was a street where the cops could, there was a police precinct down there. And the cops had this whole street that had signs, only police cars, meaning not police cars, so blue and white with a cherry on top. It was when the guys drove to work from Staten Island or wherever they were, they could park there, right? And not have to pay for parking, right? Well, that somehow deflected, that energy beam went straight down the street and vaporized all of the cars. The metal was just, puddles. But all the tires, the hoses, the belts were still in shape. Very similar to what happened in California in those fires about 5 or 6 years ago, where it just wiped out whole neighborhoods along the coast of, lots of houses, thousands of houses. And, everything that was metal but things that were, the whole house was incinerated, but all the flowers up to the house were still fine. The grass was still green. The trees were not burned, right? I mean, these things are being played out in front of us over and over again, but we don't even see what's going on. So dreamy dreamland, so get to, have this thing. I'm like washed out like a rag. And we get up, we go through customs. And there's Neil, on the other side of the glass. He's like so happy to see us. He's jumping up and down like a happy puppy. He's got this girl with her. And he's been telling me that he's got his own version of Donna, right? Because Neil stayed with me about a month and a half before we got on the Gray Rabbit and went to San Francisco where Don was, because I was doing this job. I was like the Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein of Xenon the Disco. It was all built. All the everything was wired, but nothing worked. And in a disco, if it don't work, it's not a disco. So I was paid whatever I wanted, and but I had a very limited window. So the mobsters, Tony Two Toes and Bobby Bentno, said, "Okay, you got to stay here. You can't go away from here until it's done." I said, "Well, my wife is you're not going to like that." And anyway, I went and talked to her about it, and she said, "Well, I'll just go to San Francisco." So they gave her a nice airplane ticket, a chunk of change, and she took my dog Duca Delight, and went to San Francisco, and that's a whole nother story. But anyway, about a few days into this, and they wouldn't let me out of the building. I said, "Tony, I got to see sunlight at least once a day." So he would walk me from Xenon, which is near Times Square, and we'd walk over to 8th Avenue, kind of near a bus, Port Authority bus, and in front of this, behind this fruit stand, which runs the whole block, is that place that you see in Goodfellas, where he takes his new Jewish girlfriend and he walks in through the kitchen and they put the table. That's the place. It's like the Walmarts for gangsters. You can get anything you want: guns, food, entertainment, whatever you want. And we would go there for breakfast, and we'd have lobster and steak, eggs Benedict, a bunch of other things, a bottle of Don, freshly squeezed orange juice, and we'd be smoking these blunts, right? And Tony was so the man that we'd walk through Times Square smoking blunts next to cops, and they would just bow their hat and said, Mr. Kotani, sir. So those are guys I work for. And one Sunday, there's nobody in Times Square, and in the arms of George M. Cohan, it's like where whatever Broadway and whatever other avenue cross at Times Square. I don't think it's 8th Avenue. It's I forget, but that's what I call it, Times Square. Broadway and whatever avenue that is. There's a little like park, little greenness with benches around, spokey, wrought iron fence, and a statue of George N. Cohan with his hands out, "Mommy," and in those arms was a naked guy screaming, and Tony liked to microdose along with blunting, and this is like 70. It was probably 75. Yeah. Anyway, no, it was 76. End of 76. It was like the fall of 76. That's what it was. Anyway, because I had moved out of Pearl Street and was over in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. And that's where I met Don on the subway. So anyway, I said, let's check this out. So Tony said, "Is that a purple unicorn?" I mean, he was like, I said, could be, but he's screaming. So we went up there, and I step up on the park bench and I go, "Hey, buddy, come on, give me your hand," and easily come down, because if you fall on this fence here, you're going to be skewered, because it was put up there to kill people, right? All the parks in New York have these wrought iron fences because the Irish um, draft rebellion formulated in parks. And then, when the cops would come, they'd spread out it all. So all the parks became places that you had to make it so you could herd people. If they were in there to do something political, you had to be able to keep them in a corner, right? So they couldn't just run away. And so I get him up there, and he's like, "Wow, wow, wow." And Tony says, "Here, buddy, smoke this." And well, yeah, he stopped blabbering. He goes, "I'm looking for the YMCA." I said, "Buddy, you're right in front of it." You were just at a place where you were up above where the sign is, and there's a thing over it, and you couldn't see it. And he said, "Oh." I said, "Why you want to go there anyway?" "Well, I was told that I have no place to stay," and they said I could stay there. I said, "No, not really." And I said, "Come with us. We'll put you up." And Tony looked at me. I said, "Come on, Tony, let's go." So we do, and we go in there, and I got this guy because Tony looked at Neil as a pet. you know, he was a purple unicorn, right? He would introduce, "This is my purple unicorn," and so that got Tony, because every 5 minutes, "Is it done yet? Is it done yet?" I mean, and I couldn't do anything when those guys asked me if it's done yet. And so I got them out of the way, and Neil stayed there, and they fixed up a green room with a beautiful bed and kitchen and titty bar girls, you know, making food and giving you whatever. But I was, stone cold monogamous married guy, right? I love my Don, right? Now I like these girls. I talked to them. We talked about everything, and half of them were girls who were just doing this to get enough money to go to law school so they could be lawyers and then be lawyers for these mobster guys. Anyway, so that's how the food chain worked. And Neil was just having the time of his frigging life. They went and got him $1,000 suit. They just made him, feel like a mobster, and and he was Tony's purple dinosaur, right? So there we are in Sydney, and all of this is running through my head, right? I can't even put a pin into what time is because I'm experiencing all this stuff from my experience out there in the air, crossing, southern hemisphere to northern hemisphere, seeing the swirl, being mesmerized, having all these dreams, and then I, you know, there's Neil, and Neil is, and so Neil, I'm a writer, he's a writer, he's a cartoonist. We loved sending this before email. We love sending letters to each other, right? And he said, I found my Donna, it's Leslie, and it looks just like her, and blah blah blah. I said, okay. So we get there, and there's this girl that's what I would call a muffin top, a little chunky, big top, and she's all over Neil, right? And she's got blonde hair. She does not look anything like my Don, right? So I said, "Is this Leslie?" "Oh no, no, this is my friend Nikki. I needed a ride to Sydney. She said she would drive me, and we're going to go to the party of a friend of ours up in the hills." I said, I'm pretty wiped out, and I'm still like couldn't. And so we go over to where the bags are, and they've lost our bags, right? And I am prepared for this. I'm a world traveler, and so I never travel with anything. If I'm going to go someplace for a while, I don't bring anything except whatever I need at that moment, right? A little bag over my shoulder. Don, I brought it to a friend of mine who made like suitcases for world travelers, and he made her a special suitcase, and they had lost it, and she had her everything in it, and I had photographed everything. I had gone to a friend of mine who is a notary public, and he notary republic to everything. I got the international law. There's international law that if you fly an airline and lose your shit, you can prove what you had on getting on the airplane. They have to give you the money right then. So I had all the receipts of what everything was worth. I had documentation. This is what got on the airplane. They lost it. Here it is. And I went to the office, and the guy said, "Screw you." I said, "What do you mean, screw me? This is international law, blah, blah, blah." I said, "Well, go back to New York and fight it out with lawyers. Here, screw you." And that was my introduction to, the rule of law in Australia. Right? So Don, because it was her bag, she jumped across the table, tried to strangle the guy, and there were cops in there, and they were like not just your city cops. They were guys who could throw you back on an airplane and send you back home. And I said, "No, no, no, no." And Neil, who is like everyone in Australia knew Neil because he's like the Gary Trudeau, and so he said, "No, no, no, no." She's just upset. We'll go. So we did. We turned around. We left. Got in the plane. I'm still hallucinating. All these like characters are around me. All these little people are around me, right? And so we drive up in the hills, and Sydney is this big port, right? To have the archetypical big bridge and the opera house that looks like a clam, and that's supposed to mean that these people are cultured. Not really. And but they are interesting. I really like the Australian people. They have a amazing attitude about things. So and the average people are not like the Reginald Ansets and the Rupert Murdochs, right? Who are bloodline sociopath reptiles. Anyway, so we drive up in the hills, and there are all of these council flats, meaning houses for poor people, and really nice. Meaning, if I was a rich guy, I want to on top looking down. But all the rich people lived in all these old neighborhoods that were like, if you live here, you've made it. So we parked the car, we walk on this thing, and there's a fence, and there's like the city just below, and the sun is going down over here, and and this is really nice park, and we're about to go in this building, and I said, "Listen, I really am not up for any of this. I am just going to sit at this park bench and watch the sun go down and watch the stars come up, and I'll be in an hour or so. I just need to sit here and meditate and experience it." So, good morning, good evening, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland with Sensei Al Bob. And you are in a shamanic state of mind because I started this out with a little beginning of I'm going to count to 3, right? And I only got to 1. So you're in a deep, 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 deep state of conscious reflection of meditation. You're going into dream state, where is dreamland, where energy is of a different matter. It's a photonic rather than incandescent. And when 2012 occurred, we went through this auric belt of dimensions. We're in a new dimension, kid. And the old farts like JoJo and Putin Boy, who are just, poster boys of the hidden hand. Hidden hand is desperately petrified of us waking up, and they're doing everything they can: wars, famines, pestilence, you name it. Everything that we're supposed to be scared of is occurring. But it's nothing to be scared of because it's happening in another dimension, but on our screens right in front of our faces. And as Donnie would say, fake news, right? And Donnie was he was a chump, know nothing loser, right? His father, Fred, was a total scumbag, Nazi, KKK, total racist. And so Donnie, his older brother, who was supposed to take over the business, didn't want to be that. Just loved flying airplanes, wanted to be an airline pilot, right? And his father destroyed him. So Donnie took over, right? And the closest thing Donnie got to the military was military school, where he wear a cartoon outfit, right? And then he went from failure to, the art of the deal was his failure after he made money on failure, right? Because he couldn't do anything but fail, right? And he still is a failure, right? And step back and look at it. Every development he did failed, and he bought up, people who had money bought up all of the West Side that had been the Pennsylvania rail yard, which is now trillion dollars worth of condos, and he had to first nibble at that, and he totally failed at that one. And he had gotten a couple of right when gambling was about to really take off, he bought some old funky hotels in New Jersey, down there where they had gambling, and he rode those into the ground. And he had some really premier hotels in New York, and he rode those into the ground. He bought low and drove it into the ground lower, and was bought out, and he made his profit. And the most money he ever made was his TV show, The Apprentice. And GE, the number one at the time military industrial contractor, just like they did with Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was on GE Playhouse and did that for years, and got him ready to be governor, which got him ready to be president, right? And take over the Republican Party. You have to realize, up until Ronald Reagan, the Republican Party was the liberal part of the corporate wing. The Democrats were the conservatives, the red dog, rabid Southern, guys were Democrats, right? And there were other, Republicans who were somewhat conservative, but not like the Democrats, out and out racist, Ku Klux Klan, like Fred Trump. So they put Donnie for 10 years as the apprentice. He was the apprentice. He was being apprenticed to be president. You're fired. That's all he did. There were two things Donald Trump did. He destroyed elements of the government, the institutional elements that were working pretty good, like the EPA, like OSHA, like FEMA, like a number of other entities. And he didn't change the laws, he just defunded them. And then he gave a mammoth, the largest tax cut in American history. Why do you think everything is because he took all the money out of the piggy bank and gave it to corporations and the richest people, right? And then rejiggered the and he didn't do any of this. He was just the front man, right? He was the barker. But the Federal Reserve then, from that point on, from 08 on, and there was no difference between Bill Clinton, George W., Obama, and Donnie. they all are, could have been. They all acted. You look at the things they did, right? And so, and it was done to a script. And all my school, oh, you can't say that. You can't say it's a script. Oh, it's just the flow of his story, right? His story. That's all it is. It's a script. And last night, I was, yeah, I'm out here in the deep green, and you know, and I was just, I have to go someplace. I don't have the internet in my man cave, right? And the rich people have come here, and they're like an existential threat. They've already destroyed everything, right? And we have roads being washed into the lake because rich guys have cut 200 acres on top of this mountain without any drainage or any thought of where the water's going to go, right? And they did it, starting in 2020 and 2021. They bought up everything, and at bargain basement sale, the market crashed. The economy looked like it was going to go worse than '08, and these guys just bought up everything. And then summer 2020 and 2021, they just ripped and teared. And so those 2 summers, it was dry, right? And this is a rainforest, and we've had, last 6 to 10 years, it's since 2012, it has been very dry. And, it's not like California, it still kind of rains here because all the weather comes to the west and smashes into our little neck of the woods here and either bounces down the Blue Ridge into North Carolina or bounces up across the Appalachian up into upstate New York. And when I first got here, it like rained every day, 3 or 4 times, And so anyway, these last 2 summers, they ripped and tore everything. And this is a small, small, small farming community. That was, like garden paradise, the kingdom of beans, and the truck farmers here made pretty good living up to 1970 when they flooded out Butler. And there's now a big lake there. And Butler was a pretty big town, right? And it was almost the county seat, but it was more people were farmers. We don't want that. So, but the federal government built this little dam and then flooded this whole valley out. And because the Sawtooth Mountains, the lake is not just the big part, it's like all over the place. It flooded out a 200 square mile thing. And all the time from, back before the revolution, this was a place of lights. The Indians, the Cherokee talked about it, and they have a written language, and they were quite sophisticated tribe. And so there was something dimensionally going on here. And then, just as a bird flies 120 miles is Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which is where they built, was major lab where they built the Manhattan Project. That's where they had all the tokamaks making uranium-238 to be the little boy bomb, not the plutonium bomb. And they had two the uranium bomb, plutonium bomb. Out there in the West Coast, in Hanford, they had lots of reactors cooking away, making plutonium. Here they were taking uranium and chemically bringing it into yellow cake and then, energizing it electromagnetically and turning it into an isotope that never existed. So around Oak Ridge, within a 200 square mile radius, there are all kinds of facilities that were just like put in little towns. And a good example is Unicoi, a little town right on the border of North Carolina. And it's right near a place called Flag Pond. And that is where to today, all of the U.S. Navy's nuclear fuel is manufactured, right? And in that process, there's a lot of super duper deadly toxic waste manufactured. And, OSHA and the EPA have lots of rules about how you need to get rid of that material. Very expensive, you know. A 55-gallon drum, if you get rid of that safely, costs about $100,000. But if you pay some, holler guy $5,000, a 75-gallon drum of this, he'll go off and dig a hole and bury it. Right? So all of that, like near Flag Pond, is everyone's dying of cancer if they're not dead already. And I had a piece of property up there, and I saw this guy in a bunny suit one day. I was going down into Flag Pond. This New Yorker guy had, retired there. He had a great Italian restaurant that had great coffee and espresso, and he was open in the morning. He made these little favo delos, these like little pockets of yumminess, and that was his breakfast. It was like a breakfast thing, right? An Italian breakfast thing, like a egg McMuffin, but much much better. And I was a New Yorker. He was a New Yorker. We were buds, and so he would every morning have a box of like 10 of these things and a thermos. I gave him two thermoses. I gave him and he would fill it up with espresso, and I would, take that up. And my helper and I were laying out because I was right on top of this mountain. I had a view of all of North Carolina, all the way to Georgia. With a good telescope, I could see the Atlantic, and I could see the other way into the Appalachians, but they were a little above, so but I could see all the way down the valley. Anyway, one morning, and I didn't live there. I was just like, was getting the road in and getting the septic in, the power in, and I tried to drag a trailer up there. I drove my school bus up there, and so it was like Cadillac camping, right? And it was Cadillac camping, 1.0, and where I'm now is like Cadillac camping 3.2. So anyway, every morning I would drive down 6 miles down this hill, and it was really beautiful. And there's this stream over here, and I'm going along. And I've been there now 2 years, and I got to know all the Holler folk, and a lot of them had cancer, right? But they were still really, I mean, they'd come over and help, or give me like my spring. This old grandma doused the spring out for me because there was no, top of the mountain, no, she found a spring. Right? So her son came over and helped me build a spring box. Right? So I had a spring and I had a hose, pipe coming at it to where I was going to put whatever I was going to have, my water. So I had electricity, my water source, and I was using that water to like make concrete and stuff like that, but I hadn't tested it. And I was going to drink it. So I had, every time I went there, I bought 5 or 6, gallon jugs of distilled water. That was my cooking and drinking water. And, but I just, I understand groundwater, and I don't drink stuff that I don't have thoroughly tested. That's why I moved here. First thing I did was I took water from here and had it tested. And the guy said, "Man, this is I've never seen water like this. You should bottle it." So anyway, that was one of the things, and everything was ready. All I had to do was cut and make my site. Bingo bango. I didn't have to really make any roads. I didn't really have to make, bring in the power like I had to for Flag Pond. Anyway, I'm driving down to get my breakfast yummies and talk to my Italian retired mobster buddy, and so he and sometimes I'd have my helper Tim Terrific, Tim anytime Tim, and he was definitely one of my adepts. I was teaching. He knew how to swing a hammer. He wasn't really a fine carpenter, but he was a good early. He was above an apprentice carpenter. I mean, I laid things out, he could nail them together, right? I could give him a cut list, he could cut the stuff up, and it would be cut the way it should be. So, and he was young, and he was really into herbs, massage, and esoteric, and things that went bump in the night. And so he hung out with me for he was a great adept, a great student, a great, I was like, he was like Obi-Wan Kenobi, and I was like Obi-Wan Kenobi's top dog, right? So, because he's turned into quite the mystic homeboy himself. So, he's a big time cancer, so he's super sensitive. So that sensitivity can often get him into trouble. Me, the Aquarian, don't really care. I prepare for the worst and enjoy that it's not that way. It can always be worse, right? So, there I was, being the dude in that neighborhood, and I knew that it was going to hit because Asheville. I left Asheville because I came from Cornell. I went to Asheville in '91. I left Asheville in '98 and kept going back, and that's why I found the Flag Pond place. Right, really super, like on top of a freaking mountain, the most amazing view, a road pretty much up there. I just had to make it so I could get the school bus up there, and so you're seeing all this, right? You're in a harmonic, uh, photonic dream state, right? You're seeing this whole story I'm telling you is you're seeing it in dream time, right? This is what dream time is, right? Dream time don't lie, especially after 2012. So here we are. We're in a whole different ball of wax. We are not like up until 2012. 2012 was Piscean age, and yes, from not 1891 until because the Piscean age lasted almost 6,000 years, and that last 100 years was quite a ride because powers that be knew about everything that was happening. They were trying to prepare so they could continue control even in this new dimension, right? This new age, right? Because everyone who goes on and on about the new age is like the loyal opposition. Anybody who has any kind of popularity is a loyal opposition. You know, um, Rogan, he is a loyal opposition. He worked for NBC. He was a game show host himself, but he's allowed to do his shtick because that's like the pressure relief valve. I mean, he lets a lot of people like Joe. You should get me on your show. You should get me to be um, your buddy who shows up every now and then. I could be like Soupy Sales had White Tooth and Black Fang or White Fang and Black Tooth. I don't know, but I could be like that, right? And in the hand, guys, I don't care who rules, who owns, because it doesn't matter. The next X amount of years is not a rebranding. It's if we have to have nuclear war. Gene Roddenberry was a real visionary because when he did Next Generation, they started off with them bumping into Q, and then we have QAnon. We bumped into Q, and Q knocked us way out there, where we bumped into the Borg, right? And all the while, Q took John Luke away and put him on trial for everything that white Anglo-Saxon males did, right? And gave us a really interesting little picture of what it was, right? And then for the next, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years, we had all these adventures, and constantly Borg was always somebody who we were fighting, and we saw what kind of more than what James Kirk Star Trek showed us, what the Federation was, right? And a more aligned, more evolved, more let's do this right. But the first show showed us what, we had a nuclear war, we had all the, eugenics, we had all this, Khan, who was a genetically engineered character, I mean, he was putting all this stuff together in the 60s, meaning he understood what it was for a long time So a lot of other people, mostly people who were my mentors, who basically were trying to sculpt me to be something, to be a heralder of what was coming, and I am. But being the Aquarian I am, being the cheeky monkey that I am, I kind of had to do it my own way, and it wouldn't have worked if I had put on the suit, had done it, had become Elon Musk. Nah, not really. And in 2000 and I started. Let's see, I died in 2014, so 10 years. So that's in 2008, my parents died. My family basically died. I was the only one left that wasn't, stuck in their head in the sand. And because they just wanted stop all this, I don't want to know. Stick my head in the sand, right? My oldest sister, my other sister, my brother, they were all just, they didn't want to grow. They didn't want to be. They just wanted to be a mud puppet and be relatively comfortable, up like my parents, upwardly middle class. Uh, to the mall. I don't have my mega microphone message. Supply sales came to the mall. Counting. Yeah, the materialization. And John Birmingham is, the universe wanted me to give John the school. Well, I'll give him, meaning basically I sold John the school for what I paid, and I got to live in it for 10 years, right? And so, I was able to use that cash to pay off whatever and to basically ease into American poverty, right? But ease into it. Even thanks for putting everything in capitals, gang. Lana's there, and so where was I? Oh yes, Black Pond. So I'm driving down to get breakfast, and I see this guy in a brand new spanking Ram diesel, Cummins, right? Gigantic, the biggest Ram truck it has, and it's got a gigantic flatbed on it, like 28 feet long. You could put my school bus on this thing, and there is, a track hoe and a gigantic, um, you know, backhoe slash, front end loader um, bulldozer, right? And this guy is cutting into the woods, and off to the side is another trailer that hooked up to that big long trailer, and it has maybe, I don't know, 50, 55-gallon drums, right? And there's like maybe 20 in the bed, and then there's another 20 on top of them, and then a few more. And he's got a case, and all of them are black with the radioactive symbol, and it says deadly material. Do not be exposed to, right? And he's got this one, he's got this one, and he is like moving it over into the woods where he has dug a gigantic deep pit, and the stream is going right through it, and he is putting the barrels into this pit, and the stream isn't rushing, but it's really wet, right? And he's got maybe 10 or so in there, and he's picking up, he's got two on this, strap, and he's like bringing them over there. And you can see that there's one that has crashed to the ground and broken open and is like all over. And in the stream, that yellowy glowing gook is going down the water. And I look at that. I get out. I actually have some booties, right? These plastic things that go over your feet, because I was working on a construction site that had asbestos. And so I had and I had a bunch of these respirators, serious respirators that were individually wrapped. And I mean, serious, like, real, it was like a gas mask, went over, covered your whole face, plastic thing, and these two guys, and you'd use it for X amount of time and then throw it away. They were like, you bought a case of them for $100, and there were like 20 or 30 of them in there. So I had that in the back and a thing of booties. I actually had, bunny suits, but I knew I didn't need that. I didn't touch anything. I put the the booties on that went up to my thing. I put some disposable gloves on. I put the mask on. And the beauty of these masks, they had a thing you could talk through. You could be actually heard through this thing. So anyway, I walk over and I see this guy, and he is I watch him for a good bit of time, and and I'm parked kind of up so he can't really see me unless he comes out on the road. And then he kind of parks his thing and he goes over to the front of his truck, and he's in his bunny suit, and he gets in the bunny suit, and he's pulls out his breakfast and his coffee, and he's in the bunny suit, and he's wearing the gloves, and he's drinking the coffee and eating the thing. And I know this guy, and I go, "Yo, Larry." He looks at me and he goes, "That's, Flat Pond's a little town. I know his grandma really well, who is dying of cancer, cancer of everything." And I said, "Buddy, what?" I said, "So you're," because I knew he worked in that plant. And I said, "So they're paying you a nice chunk. Yeah, I see you got a new Cummings, and that must have cost you 60 grand. And this flatbed here, that must have cost you at least 40 grand. And this backhoe here, that must have cost you at least 70 grand. And this track hoe, so you got about 200, 300 grand worth of hardware right here. Where'd you get that money?" And he goes, "Not going to tell anybody, not going to tell anybody. I'll pay you off." I said, "No, no, no. You're going to tell people. You're going to first go tell your grandma that you're killing her." "I can't do that. Can't do that. I got cancer too. I got bills to pay. Got to get my kids out of here." And I said, "They're already dead, buddy. How long you been doing this?" And then he just starts weeping and crying and weeping and crying, and lights up another cigarette. I said, "I'm leaving this up to you. Catch you later." So I went down, got breakfast, told my mobster friend, about what it was, because he was like a sledgehammer. I know he would get to the bottom of it. And then I drove up and I got Tim. I said, "Okay, we're out of here." Because, "What do you mean we're out of here?" "Just gather all the tools. We're out of here." "What?" "Yep, we're out of here. We're going to come back and get the bus at another time. But right now, but we have, nope, nope, nope." So we drove by, and the guy was, so we drove by in my little, Honda Civic or whatever I had. There he was, and he was like in plain day of sight, parked right on the side of the road. And I drove away, and we came back about a month later after I because the property I bought from this crazy guy, and I made a contract, which was legal, I went and had a lawyer write it up and sign it. And what I was doing was I didn't own the place. I was paying him off. So I had only given him $1,500. I'd been there 2 years. And there was a bailout clause. If there was anything that he hadn't told me about it, he'd have to pay me back the money twice. So I gave him about $1,500. So he had to give me like about 3 grand. And so he totally, I told him, he knew what was going on, and he was dying of cancer. So he was just, and he, he drank himself silly, and so he had to drive around in his lawnmower, and that's when I met him because he drove the lawnmower into his little pond and he was drowning, and I was looking for a place, and I kind of stepped in there and dragged him out of the water, and he was drunk, and took him to his house and blah blah blah, and so that was I bought the Deep Green in 2003, so that was probably it was after 9/11. It was between 2000 and 2003. Anyway, so I had gotten, to know everyone in Irwin, and and I was looking at this plant and everything, and then my banker told me about this property. No, I got that property in Flag Pond. I got because I was looking for a piece of property, and I found a guy in the lake, right? So this is, what happens to me is just the beyond the tip of the iceberg, right? And so me buying, I found the school by finding this guy who was like the cricket in, with the violin. He, was always having a good time. He's always drunk. He's always smoking pot. Blah blah blah. And he came from a very conservative, very well-to-do family, and he was just going that way, right? And he was a great musician. He was a drummer, right? And I think his band was Bebop Hoedown. Anyway, so but he had very conservative things, and I met him at this. It was this bar in Roanoke. I was living in Lynchburg at the time, and I was sussing out end of times. When I hit that neck of the woods, I was sent there because there were all these devil worship murders happening in Asheville. I think they still are, and this group, because Asheville had changed from being totally homeboy to trying to lift itself up from its depression debt to become the Paris of the South again. And now it's just become the hipster joint of that neck of the woods. And so, I was went to this place where I was investigating that, and I stumbled into an electric job and found an electrician who really needed me. And for 2 years, I rewired jails and hospitals, and that was so far out of he could do it, but his two sons, who were the next guys in line, and then his crew, who were his son's buddies, they could drill holes and pull Romex, but they couldn't do a hospital or a jail, right? A big jail that had electric doors and security and all that. And if he screwed up, he's going to be out millions of dollars, and so and probably go to jail. So anyway, I met him in an electric supply store in Lynchburg, and he was like, and I said, I think I can help, and I did. I straightened all that stuff out. He got addicted to me, and I had the same electric job, and after I was the farm electrician in upstate New York, above in the Finger Lakes, outside of Ithaca, I went and worked for this guy Gus Bear, and I was his boy because his two sons. It was the same story, right? And he had all these big jobs, and he could do it, but his kids were just losers. And Gus was truly amazing because before he took up his father's mantle, he was an amazing musician, and he left Ithaca at age 17 and went, first down to Music City in Tennessee, and then he went to Muscle Shoals as a studio musician and met, Elvis, and played in his band, and then he played in everybody's band, and then he went to L.A. and played for, he was the studio guitarist, and so he played with the Rolling Stones, the Beatles. When the Beatles did Shea Stadium, he was up on that. He was backup, guitarist on that. And so Gus in his basement had pictures like you could. He made his basement of his garage. That was his total man cave, and he made it into a 1950s diner, and he had the windows there that was a basement. So he had these gigantic photographs of what his little town where his favorite diner was in the 1950s. He had those blown up and lit from behind. So when you sat in there, it looked like Ithaca, New York in the 1950s, kind of near Varna, where this diner had been. And so, anyway, I worked for him 1 week. I met him. He was bald, so he wasn't pulling his hair out, but he still had long hair in the back, right? But he was bald otherwise, and refuge from his rock and roll days. And he was the main dude electrician, but he had nobody solid underneath him, so he was working himself to death. And all his life, he was lucky that he spent that 12 years being Mr. Rock and Roll because he could go down his man cave and look at all these photos, and he had $1 million worth of Stratocasters and guitars that all these great musicians, they had tons of guitars, and they would give him a guitar and sign it. He had guitars signed by Elvis and the Beatles, you name it, he had them, and hanging up on the wall with lights on them. And every Friday we go down there and we'd smoke. He had his own hyper, he was growing his own boo, and in his vault, and I'll give him some point. I mean, he had his hydroponics down. Anyway, so every Friday we go there. We drink a little Irish whiskey, have some good coffee, smoke some boo, and he'd pay me, 20 times what he's paying his boys in cash, right? And I just kept putting that away in my little, mattress, my little shack in Varna. And I worked for him for less than a year, and then he died. And his kids hated me. His daughter-in-law, who was the bookkeeper, really hated me because she knew where every penny was, and I was not getting cut. He just said he is a contractor, subcontractor. I have a private relationship, which it was, right? So I get the private. I mean, everything was above board. Everything was registered, but they were the she didn't know anything about it. She knew I was second in command, and I made everything work, and everyone was happy. And the boys kept saying, "Well, you think so? But my name's on the truck." Right? And I said, good luck with that. And the instant Gus died of a heart attack, and he was not quite 62 yet. And everything that he had loved about Ithaca was gone. His wife, that was like the hot chick of high school, when he came back, she was still okay. He married her, but she instantly turned into a muffin top girl and just spent his money and had, 2 babies, right? And just watched TV and went and drank with the girls. And all of my life has been just a representation of teaching me what's going on and to be a person to anoint. And I'm like John the Baptist. Jesus wasn't the only lucky bastard. He wasn't the only. They called it Nazarene. I mean, that wasn't like the cul-de-sac where he came from. No, that was an ancient name of a lucky bastard, someone who's placed, a child of God, who's here to help us out. Every so often we need. Now, I'm not that. I'm more like John the Baptist. I'm not even John the Baptist, right? Um, I was more like, John the Baptist's comic relief. It's like going on stage at Las Vegas. You had the, you know, Mort Saul character come on and tell a few jokes and a little bit of enlightenment. That was me. And that's what I do on here on Dreamy Dreamland. And good morning, good evening, and welcome to Dreamy Dreamland. We've been on for an hour and 49 minutes. I was actually just going to come in here and say, that's it. These dreams so affected me. I woke up, my bed was sopping wet with my tears. And I'm about to have my eyes operated on, and I have no idea. They say I'll be able to see so much better. I mean, I can see okay as everything's blurry. I need, a microscope to read by. But they say I will have, like eagle eyes from 3 feet from my nose out to infinity. So I'll be able to drive at night, and I won't have the star effect when lights are around, and it won't look like I'm, looking through Vaseline. And, the thing is, I signed on for this because my eyes were really bad. But now they're about 20% better than they were. Well, if they got 20% with nothing. Anyway, so, anytime someone cuts you, they're going to cut my eyeball up. They say, well, it only takes 15 minutes and blah, blah, blah. Everyone gets it done, da, da, da. Anyway, but it's still, I know the dynamic. So going into that, I have all of like $7 in my paycheck, in my bank account that's hooked up to my PayPal. And I have to thank, someone sent me $50. So now I have $57. But I'm about to go there. I have half a tank of gasoline. That $57 may just pay for half a tank of gasoline. It would be nice if a few more than that really beautiful person who sent me $50. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Come on. PayPal, right? The dude awake 42 at Gmail. Dude awake 42 at Gmail. Just, it's give me $50. If everyone who watches this sent me $10 a month, I have 4 people who send me somewhere between 10 and $20 a month. And it's a lot of those people for the last month and a half. The first month, last month, no one said anything. This inflation is hurting people. It's really hurting me. My basic diet is dandelions and bark, which is okay. I'm looking pretty smart. Girls were looking at me. So but I'm still in my 70s, and I'm still have my body has been ravaged and damaged by my life, and especially in 2000 and I guess let's see, 14. Um, about 2009, I was still in Florida, um, clearing up my parents' estate, and my sisters were desperate to sell everything. So my dad's estate which is worth a few mil. My sisters sold for about 200,000. Then we had to split it, right? And my mom gave my brother 50 grand because he wasn't in on this deal because he had taken my father's place as being a hard ass. And when my mom was dying, I took care of my parents for 28 years. The last year and a half, when they died, my mom, she died and came back, died and came back, died and came back in the last, 3 months of her life. And when she really, really died, and I kind of brought her back by the magic goo that they kept in the fridge, and I knew how to, instead of shooting it in her butt, I mainlined it, and it kind of stopped it because she had the death rattle. She was going out. And I went into state and I said, hey, mom, here, take a look at this. You're in state. You can see this. I was, my mom's dying in the death rattle, and she's not in her body. And I go to where she is, and she is in New York City, 1934. And she's in this amazing apartment that she had gotten from a rich guy for taking care of his 2 grandmas and his wife. And he had no cash to pay her, but he had a lot of real estate. He had built Forest Hills. So she had this gigantic place, and she was in charge of Roosevelt Hospital and ran their nursing school. So she had her brothers and sisters. It had like 20 bedrooms and their own bathrooms and a ballroom. And she had all her nursing girls who were hot to trot and looking for a rich husband come over there. And every Saturday night, she had these balls. And that's what these girls were doing with the rich guys. They'd show up in, tuxedos and pretend, and the girls would dance around. Everybody get drunk. And it was straight out of the movies of that era. And the book written by what's his name and his wife Gilda or Zelda. And anyway, it was that. So I went into state and looked, and there my mom was, an evening gown, surrounded by men like flies on the shit, and she was just flirting. And my mom knew how to play people and get the most out of it, the triple Capricorn she was, and have a good time. She was a party girl. And I go there and I'm standing there, in my bathrobe. And she looks over and I say, hey, mom. And she turns, what are you doing here? You shouldn't be here. You weren't even born yet. Get out of here. I said, come on, mom. You got to come back. No, I don't want to come back. They deal with all that crap. Your father, blah, blah, blah. No, I'm here. I'm going to die any second now. Don't stop, and I'm having a good time. I said, mom, you haven't had, my mom's super duper Catholic, haven't had left rights. You've been giving Father Larry all those checks all these years. You want to get into gated community?" She goes, "You're right. Okay, I'll be right back." Right? And it was about 11. No, it was about 6. My dad hadn't gotten up, but homemade nurse was there, and she was a nurse practitioner. The doctor was there. The lady who was, we paid to keep an eye on her at night, Timothy, was there, and I was there, but I was like over in the corner in state, and then she pops right up and she goes, "I'm back," and I kind of come back, and they all shit a brick because they were expecting her. Yeah, she had come away from death's door. Her lungs were drying out. She didn't have the death rattle, but she was heading out the door, and she popped. She goes, "Go get Father Larry," And so my father said, "What's going on?" And I said, "Dad, Mom's dying." "What? Oh my God!" He starts, "Ah, oh, honey," and she goes, "I don't know you. Get the fuck out of here." And so, got on the phone, called up Father Larry. "Hey, Wilma, she's dying. Better get your ass over it. She wants her last rites." Right? So he said, "Well, I got things to do." I said, "Hey, you gave all that money. She's got this clause in her will that you're going to get more than you got over all these years if you just give her last rites." Of course, she didn't have that clause in her will. I just told him that because I am my mother's son. And so, so he goes, "Okay, I'll be there this afternoon. Make sure she doesn't die." I said, "Okay." So, doctors, takes me. So the nurse told me what you did. That was amazing. He just came, how did I? I said, "I did it. Don't worry about it. She's not dead. I didn't kill her. She's alive. She would have been dead." He goes, "No, you did a miracle. You brought your mother back from the dead." I said, "Yeah, good, good. I know how to do that. I was an EMT for 3 years, knew how to do lines. I knew how to do a lot of things." So I didn't know. "Well, you never really talked to me. You know, I can give you information. You never even listen. That's one reason she's dying is you." And he didn't. He left. Right. Whereas the nurse, in fact, she was great. She was, So she spent the rest of the day there with my mom. My mom really liked her. She didn't really. My mom was like ran hospitals. She knew doctors like that. Right. So she was happy when he lived. She told him to get the fuck out too. So, "I'm dying. Don't bother me. And so, I'm not coming back again. I'm out of here any minute now. I'm just waiting for Father Larry. So kids, you seeing all of this, right? I'm not just telling the story. If any of you an hour and 57 minutes ago had started breathing and went into state, you would be seeing all of this. You would be really being there. The movie Being There, you would be there, right? And it's quite interesting that, I can't get above 500. I have 3 likes. Thanks for that. No one ever really comments. You do chat, and I appreciate that, but I'm not wearing my microscope glasses. Yep, hypersonic tech. Yep. You're gonna go live, Lana. You want to join the show? Let's bring Lana on, even if she is live, wherever she's live. Um, do, 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 do. So you get the general picture, right? Let's see. Do, 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 do. And after I talk to Lana, I'm gonna see if Anthony is still there, because he jumped in for a second and then disappeared. Oh, there she is. She's ringing. Do, 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 do. Boop, 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 boop. Anyway, so my mom died, and then my dad, and we went up. Hey, baby, you been watching, eh?
Hey, I am.
You like the show today?
Yeah, you're always awesome.
Yep. So,
Yep.
I had some really stressful dreams last night. Like prophetic dreams.
Right?
And it's not like I haven't seen this stuff before, but it just came and I couldn't wake up, right? And I just kept seeing all this stuff. And then just before I
Okay.
woke up, my master came to me and said, "Okay, you're doing a great job. You're really doing a great job. Don't get disappointed. Just because you have 3 cents in the bank, don't worry about it. Just because you're going to go get operated on and you can't even trust the person who said they drive you to the operation to be there when you come out blind, don't worry about it. It's all you're doing a great job, you know." And so I was going to like tell everyone to fuck off and you know and I decided, John does these
Right.
off the hook, and you can't say what John's shows are off the hook. They are just a mirror image of what the material world is. He is
Yeah.
he is doing a service. He is doing this, but most people don't understand that he is this poster boy, right?
But thing is, John,
Hmm.
he's gonna get his.
Well, don't you
Oh,
don't
don't
you
worry about
realize
John.
he's already been getting his?
He's stupid.
I mean, he is getting his. You don't have to wait. He's
I
getting
know
it.
that.
Yeah,
He's always been getting his.
right. So, and
Yeah. So
and that,
never mind him.
right, never
And
mind it. Except to
honestly,
say that
Bob,
he's the poster boy of all this. You want to see what it is? You want to see what you're going to go through? You want to see what your life is? Just go look at that. Right now, I am the antecedent,
Yeah.
and I could be. He gets 150 people watch a show, but he knows how to manipulate all
Yeah,
of
but
that.
that's 150 people that are stupid. So
Right,
do you want
exactly.
them?
Right. I get 20 or
Yeah.
so that are kind of aware and kind of on top, not on top of, but appreciating, right? Appreciating.
At least you're being seen.
Hmm. And I am pushing this out into the whole World Wide Web shamanically.
Yep.
So I'm like that little pebble
Yes.
in the bing,
Yeah.
And so when and I was just feeling sorry for him because I had like I said, I woke up soaking wet and it was really cold here. It was like we've had a really hot, like last week it was 80
Anxiety.
degrees at 3 a.m. This morning it was 45.
Yeah. But the weather has been weird everywhere.
Yeah,
It's been weird.
Right. And
It's been weird.
Earlier in March, just as the war was kicking off in the Ukraine, if you follow astrology, the stars were in places where they haven't been for like 20,000 years.
Yeah. Yep. And we're alive.
Right.
Good for us.
Right. But it was like
Yep.
a
Yep.
heralding a trumpet. Hey kids, this is what's going down. And so
Yeah. Good luck.
yes, and it's not bad, it's just what's going down. And if you are awake with who and what you are, and that you're living in a place where you are in love's co-creation. Yes, we all have to deal with life. Yes, I have to
Yep.
deal with
I
whatever.
hope so.
But if you're awake,
Hmm.
when the shit, and it isn't like when the shit hits the fan. The shit is hitting the fan, and has been
Yep.
since the
For
year
quite a
2000.
while.
Yeah, for quite a while. This ain't just happening now. So if you,
But hey, Bobo,
yeah.
I just have to ask you.
Yes.
So when you did the surgery with the eyes, I mean the eyes is like the soul. So
I haven't done the surgery yet.
wasn't
I haven't done the surgery yet.
you haven't done that yet?
No, they just were.
I
Yes.
thought you did.
No. I just went them to measure everything and see what they were going to do and tell me what they're going to do and blah blah blah. No, the surgery
Okay.
surgery is coming up in a few days and only one eye. They do one eye at a time just so if you go blind in it, you got the other one.
Yeah, and you kind of have to go blind. Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
So anyway, I asked my doctor. I said, so how many of these do you do a week? And she said 20. I said, how long have you been doing this? 18 years. How many got fucked up? She goes, well, I haven't fucked up any. There have been about 100 over 18 years that I had to redo it, and then they were okay.
Okay.
So that's the statistic. So that's meaning if you're gonna have somebody do this to you, you want to have somebody like her doing it.
Yeah, I mean, like you always talk about the feminism,
Right.
so it's kind of like in your cards
Right.
to get it
Right.
by a woman.
Right.
And also, you know what? I mean, like, come on. And also, she should have fucked up somebody
Yeah. Right.
just to know how you do it the right way.
But she fixed
Kind of,
it.
if
See,
you-
that's when I said so they were fucked
Hmm.
up, and she goes, "Well, I had to redo it, and then they were okay. Yep, everyone's okay."
Okay, so that's bullshit.
Right. Right. So, but I
Yeah.
mean, statistically though, she's
Oh.
in a good realm. I
Should
did
never go by odds.
right.
That's stupid.
Well, that's one place to start.
No, it's not actually. I mean, like, if you
Well,
want,
you tell you. Well,
like, look at
give
the
me
weather.
give me the thesis on
No,
that. Yeah,
mm-mm.
well, I mean, I did
Uh-uh.
all the other stuff. I did my gut, did meditation. I used the magic 8 ball. I used my cards. They all said, "Don't worry about it."
I don't think you should either. It's gonna be okay.
Yeah, it's going to be okay. I mean, all of my
Yeah.
other denovation, deviation, looking at things, my other strings, they all said, "Don't worry about it." So I'm not going to worry about
But it's normal to worry. I mean, like,
it.
you
Right,
won't be
exactly.
normal if you don't
Right.
worry.
I'm just
Of
not.
course.
I'm just not overly worrying.
Don't let you take that.
And what I'm doing is, it's now getting warm. This morning when I started, it was 58 degrees. Now it's probably 80. So
Right.
I'm shedding my warm jacket. Anyway,
Yeah.
so each minute I've been appreciating, and then I have these pretty amazing dreams, and I realized that I cried so much. I've washed
Hmm.
whatever crap in my eyeballs away. You know?
Sometimes crap is good.
Yes, exactly. Anyway, so the annoying things that were annoying me aren't around me.
Okay.
The fact I can't go on the internet anytime I want is good, and the fact that I can't drive anywhere I want to because gas is so expensive is good because it's keeping me here and it's quiet. It's nice.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, and so I'm enjoying all the beauty and I'm puttering around and it's all good. So
That's good.
yeah. So
Good.
I was just telling all these stories about how, again, none of this is new, right? And I'm just the guy who has stumbled through all of this and been aware enough
Yeah.
to observe it, write it down, take pictures of it, experience it, and share it with everyone else. And
Yeah, well, Bob, if somebody gets an eye surgery, I mean, like that's the eyes.
yeah,
I mean, you should act. You should have dreams that
Right.
that's not normal.
right,
Yeah,
no
should
kidding.
not be a weird thing. It's normal.
Right.
To get
right.
abnormal dreams.
Right.
I mean, like,
And they weren't, and none of
So-
these dreams were like scary new. They were all things I knew and experienced. It was just the way
Yeah.
they
subconsciously.
right.
Yeah.
And I
Huh.
consciously was aware of these things too. And so
Yeah.
it wasn't
Wow.
like anything new. And I always have, I mean, that's why the show's called Dreamy Dreamland, because I always have dreams. I mean, I have dreams every night that I remember, right? And I don't even need to write them down anymore. They're there. And so dreams aren't scary to me, right? And I can have, when I went from my grandma to back to my family at 6, I had no problem getting up at my grandma's house and using the bathroom. But when I was in the room with my brother, for some reason, I couldn't get out of bed and I wet the bed. And for some strange
Okay,
reason,
that's normal.
right. And for some strange reason,
Huh.
I actually, when I wet myself, I went to a memory of myself being an infant, being born, and the first diaper they put me in, and I had a hard birth. So in my mom, she was smoking, cartons of cigarettes while I was in her womb. She was drinking liters of booze. So, I was exposed to that toxic environment. And then her birth cord tried to strangle me at birth, but luckily there was a female doctor who saved the
Oh,
day,
shit.
and I didn't die, and my mom didn't die, and I remember all of that,
Kept each other alive.
and she took me over into this place where she had built an incubator. They didn't have incubators in those days,
You
and
been in an incubator as well?
yeah, and she put me in an incubator, and I was sitting in there, and it was great. It was warm. It was 100% oxygen. My lungs were going, wow, this is great. If this is what being alive is, give me more. And then I urinated on myself, right, in my diapers, and I was aware. I said, oh, this liquid is coming out of me. I wonder what that is. And oh, it's warm. Boy, it's got an interesting smell. And then it got cold, and I said, I don't know if I like this. And then she took me out and changed me, and she kind of laughed. And then I put me back in, and then I crapped myself. And I said, boy, what the heck? Boy, So those were my first two memories of that. So when I was 6,
That's amazing.
when I was 6,
And
I had no
okay.
problem, wetting the bed. It was no big deal. Oh, this is kind of comfy. And it was such a lumpy
when did you stop?
Yes. Oh, so my parents freaked out, sent me to a shrink, and then
Okay.
the shrink said, "Well, he's blah 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 blah," right?
Mhm.
And so my mom, who is always the smartest girl in the room and real common sense, said, "Well, we'll just send him back to grandma's, have her tune him up." So I went back.
Amazing.
I went back to grandma's, right? And so
Mhm.
and I sleep in my bed in her house. Don't wet the bed. I get up, go to the bathroom, no problem. So she was
Okay.
a real movie person, and we would go see a movie, if not 2 or 3, every week, right? And we go see
What kind of movies?
every kind of movies, you name it.
Everything?
Yes, sci-fi,
Sci-fi?
Western,
Really?
love, noir. She knew everything
that's
about
awesome.
movies, everything about movies, and she had this. She loved seeing what movies and how it represented the real world, and we talked about it. I mean, like I remember at 2 when she took me to a movie the first time, and we went, and our whole thing was we would go. There was a big movie theater. That sat 1,000 people. Back in the day, they didn't have
Oh wow.
right, a big movie theater, and it was air conditioned and heated, and we would walk there from her house, no matter what the weather was, see a movie on a Wednesday or Thursday, and a matinee cost a nickel. And if we wanted
That's,
to,
I don't know how to translate. Nickel
5
in
cents,
Swedish
5
coins.
cents,
So
the smallest amount,
okay.
not a krona, like 1/100th of a krona.
Uh-huh.
That was a
Okay.
movie, right?
Wow.
And then there was a Schrapp's ice cream place that was really fancy and made sundaes, and we go there and have a sundae, and we talk about the movie. And if we
Okay.
and we always kept a ticket stub because we would go have a thing, and we go watch the movie again for free because we had the ticket stub.
Okay,
And
so you talked about the movie, and
yeah,
then
and then we'd have
then you
a
went back
Sunday,
to
and
watch it
then we
again.
we'd go see it again if she wanted to, and then we'd go have dinner at her house. So that was a weekly thing. So she takes me to a movie called
That's beautiful.
Forbidden Planet,
Wow.
which was a takeoff of Shakespeare's Prosperos, which was a
Okay.
takeoff of Gilgamesh, the first printed book.
Gilgamesh, yeah,
Yes. The
cool.
king that gets stuck on the
Yeah,
island,
wow.
and he genetically
Wow.
engineers creatures to keep him company. His best friend Enkidu, who is more human than any human.
Gilgamesh.
And so
Yeah.
that's the movie, but it's sci-fi, and it's where it's this forbidden planet that a Earth group crashed on. They discovered an ancient civilization that knew all about humans. They traveled the galaxies. When we were cave people, they were, romping around us. And so, and then one night they disappear, right? I mean, just wiped off the face of their planet. Now,
Creation, yeah. Sorry.
all their cities, all their art, everything on the surface gone. But the big, gigantic machine that they were spending 1,000 years building was still underground, still working. And this guy for 20 years was doing his research, figuring out about their culture, blah, blah, blah. And everyone on this, they all crash landed on this planet. Most of them survived the crash landing. But after a while, this thing came and killed everyone except he and his wife, who was pregnant. She died in childbirth, leaving her with him with a daughter who never saw another human except her dad. So when these guys show up, 30, high testosterone guys who've been stuck in a spaceship for the last 6 months show up, and they're all like, good looking. She goes, her hormones start pumping, and daddy tries to get rid of them, but can't. And then says, okay, let me show you why you have to leave. And you can't say anything about this. And he shows them this whole culture and said, if humans got a hold of the shit, that would be the end of the end of the universe. They would use it all in the wrong way. So
the Sumerians.
Right. Exactly. So, bottom line is this.
That's interesting.
This machine, what the machine was done was this super evolved society was getting to a point where all they did was think. So all the material shit, they wanted some machine god to do for them. So they made this machine that had unlimited power that could make anything out of just raw energy, just from their thoughts. So they thought they were so evolved and weren't violent and all the above that this thing was fine. But they didn't realize the monster from their deepest caveman self that was still in there, that they had paved over with their culture, was still there. And once they turned the machine on, that monster had unlimited power, and that's what wiped them out. That machine. And so when that guy and his girl were the only two on the planet, the machine really had nothing to work with. But once the guy felt a threat, the machine built a monster that the space guys had in their psychosis and went after him. And so when we watched the movie the first time, my grandma sat me in the front frigging row, looking straight up at this 70 millimeter movie.
Wow.
Because, and it was in super duper color, and they didn't have any kind of computer animation. So they animated the monster on each frame of the movie.
Yeah.
So sitting in the front row, looking straight up at this gigantic screen, I could see the monster was etched. I could see the drawing marks of it, right? And so the movie ends, we go to Schraff's, and Grandma goes, so what'd you think of that? I said, Grandma, why did you have me sit in the fucking front row? My neck is killing me, Please, you sat in the back. And she goes, eat your banana split. We're going to go back and watch it again. So we go and watch it again, but this time we sit near the back in the perfect seats where you get the full, you're not too far back, you're not too,
I know,
that perfect spot.
Everything,
And we're seeing it, and I've already watched it once, and I'm watching it, and at that point, that monster looked real. I didn't see the etch marks. It looked real, fucking real. And I'm going, and I'm thinking about it, and she's looking at me thinking, and so we go back to Schraff's, and now we have dinner at Schraff's along with we have another banana split, because she goes, it's always good to start a meal with dessert. I've already had one banana split, now I'm having two, and then I'm gonna have a cheeseburger. So she goes, so what? I go, so why did we see it twice? And she goes, wrong question. What did you see in that movie that was different? And I saw you thinking. I said, well, when I sat up front, I saw that they etched the movie because my grandma, I've already seen 8,000 movies with her, and she would talk about cinematography and lighting and all of that. That's why I became a lighting designer because of her
Yeah.
and my love of electricity. But anyway, and I said, when I sat up front, I could see that they animated the monster on each frame of the film. And when we sat at the perfect spot, the monster looked unbelievably real. And she goes,
That's cool.
that is why you wet the bed. And I go, what?
Yeah, well, I mean, like that should be logical.
Right. And I
Um,
go, what? And she goes, you, when you're with me, you see the etching on the film. When you're with your crazy family, you see the monster.
yeah,
And I
well,
said,
family's family.
Right.
I mean, like it's
my family was my
yeah,
grandma.
it should be so
My
lucky to
my
have a good
brothers,
family,
my
yeah.
sisters, my father. When I was 7, my father tripped. I was a real little kid. He tripped over me, looked at me, and said, "Who are you? I don't know you. You don't belong here. You're not one of us." Now I went to school to be a shrink. That is a straight up thing of like destroying your. As a little boy, you should be destroyed for the rest of your life. Memory is full. Mm. Well, I'm gonna try. Hey there, girl. Hey there, sweetie.
I'm sorry. I kind of pressed the camera.
Okay, and my phone is saying it's full, so who knows? But we're back. So the bottom line of all of that, my grandma said, there are no monsters. Everything is like that's everything is an illusion. It's all scratch. The only thing that's real is love. My love for you is the only real thing. You go back to your parents, you don't feel that. That's why you feel the monster. So from here on in, monster's not there. See it as that creature scraped on each frame of the movie. And when you see the monster, realize that you're that. Look at your dad. He tripped over you. He's a monster. All you got to do is, crawl under his legs, tie his shoelaces together, and then when he looks at you and comes at you, he'll fall over and not be able to get up. And I used to do that to my father all the time until he got loafers.
Well, mm,
You know.
fathers.
Yes. And so and my dad was smart enough to realize he never, I mean, he was a Sicilian Italian, so he had a temper like you couldn't believe, but he did not beat us. He would put his fist through a wall. He would rip a door off its hinges, but he wouldn't beat us, right? And my mom would just sit over there kind of chuckling, drinking her Manhattan and smoking a cigarette. And I mean, that's my family. And my poor brothers and sisters are batshit from all of that. And I'm very blessed that my formative years I was with, an unconditionally loving grandma. I had a whole bunch. She introduced me to a whole bunch of mentors, and so I never really had to depend on my parents, right? So, and they had their good side. All of my brothers and sisters and my parents had their good side. So I learned how to play to the good side instead of be terrorized or upset by the bad side.
Yeah, but the thing is, I have to ask you something.
Go.
All right. So, yeah, I'm thinking like your dad is Sicilian, right? Italian, Sicilian?
Yep.
I mean, your mom was what?
Irish, German.
Irish. So,
Irish and German.
Irish
and German.
Like from, meeting each other.
Right.
And we should be so lucky to have parents that did not do whatever their parents did to us, or they did to them, whatever.
Well, my mom definitely, but my mom was a person.
Some of them just suck.
Well, my dad's parents was my grandma, right, and my grandfather was a real highfalutin barber surgeon, right. He was J.P. Morgan's barber, so they were middle, well-to-do middle class, and my grandfather got this barbershop in the Waldorf where all the, before Hollywood, New York was where they made movies, right? And they had vaudeville, and they had, big time theater. So there were all these theater, all these actors, and so they'd be staying at the Waldorf, and my grandfather would be making, and he was a surgeon, so he would cut off that little, skin flap or that, and he was doing plastic surgery in the 20s and 30s. So he did very well, and he was always at the barbershop, right? And so my father, who was the youngest, and his two brothers, they were in a middle class family. They lived in a nice house. Italians were treated in America. Who's ever off the boat last gets treated the worst. So the Irish were treated worse than black people. And then when the Italians showed up, they were treated as worse, right? So my mom, people don't realize Germans were treated really bad in America. World War One and World War II, German folk had a hard time. But so my mom and her great aunt was a real beautiful, and her Irish family were part of what is known as the Gilded Age, meaning they came to New York and they were treated like shit. They lived in, the Five Corners, and they were smart. They got the fuck out, went into upstate New York, which was like going to another planet. And they cut all the trees down and made a fortune in lumber. And then the Erie Canal was being made so they could come from Europe and go into the heartland of the United States, where all the minerals were. And they sold all the lumber for building the Erie Canal, and they had the property, they had the politics to get the rights of way. So they owned all of the towns along the canal, and they built some of the largest chains of stores and hotels and brothels and gambling. And they were the original Irish mob. My mom. So they were really wealthy, and that was like, in the 1790s. And then they just made more and more money, but they were never the Dutch. They were never those white people, right? They were upper.
The Dutch, I can't stand
They were upper.
Annoying.
Middle class, or the lowest rung of the wealthy, however you want to put it. And so they did that. But then for 3 more generations, all those kids got sent off to college and became ne'er-do-wells. They just spent the money, right? And my mom's great aunt was a twin, and the guy she was stooping was her twin, right? And he died in the Spanish-American War. And so she hated all men, but she was a hot babe. And so she went into mourning.
A weird thing to say about that. That's
come on. That's virtually every family has something like that in it. And so she was. I don't know if you ever seen a movie called "It's a Wonderful Life" with Jimmy Stewart.
Yes, of course.
Right. And
it's beautiful.
The old crotchety rich guy in the wheelchair, Potter, Mr. Potter. My grand aunt was that guy to the 10th power. So she's been brought up like a princess. She's really hot. She's well educated, and yet
Stop saying that. It's still weird. It's still weird. Stop being incest weird.
Right.
It's weird.
She's hitting her height about 23 when she's got no real money. She's got no rich people want to marry her, but there are all of these old guys who have money, who own banks, who own this, who own that. And she takes this one guy in their county, the richest guy in their county, and flaunts her hoochie with him. And he's like, "Oh, baby." And he's like in the 80s. And she goes, "Listen, you're not touching any of this. I'm going to wiggle it in front of you, but you can't move fast enough to get it. So, but
What the fuck?
You're going to marry me. And in our marriage,
All
we're
right.
not just going to, we're going to a judge. And and she studied law and she had a contract
Yeah.
because in that time,
Mm.
if she married him, he died, somebody else would get the money. She's a woman, not her. But in this contract, she got everything he had, period. Right?
All right.
So
That's not cool.
they go in front of a judge, he says it's all, and that judge becomes the arbiter of the estate in her favor. So she takes him home, and all she's a really good cook. She gives him lobster and oysters and steak. That's it. And fucks his brains out 24/7 until he dies 3 weeks later of a heart attack.
Oh, but you just tell stories like it's nothing sometimes. I gotta stop you sometimes. For real. Sometimes somebody's gotta stop you. Sometimes you tell stories like, everything I say is just pa 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 pa.
So
Be
how do
like,
how do I
"Oh, this-
how do I tell this?
ah,
So, but it's I have to squish a big
mm,
3-hour movie into like 10 minutes. So anyway, so that
oh,
she does this 4 more times to the point she
oh, shit.
owns Watertown and the surrounding 4 counties. Right?
I mean, how good was she? She must have been
She
like
was
something
evil.
no
I
human
said
being
she
has
was
been through.
She was Mr. Potter
So
to
it's
the
bullshit.
to the 10th power.
Bullshit.
She was
Yeah, that's
the worst human
bullshit.
being, right?
I call it bullshit.
Okay. So
Yeah.
so here she has my mother's family, right? So her nephew is my mother's father. He went to college. He was an engineer. He was a smart guy, but he worked for a large company and they paid him nothing, right?
Okay.
So they did send him over to Germany to study a process. And in that process, he met my mother's mother, a German woman, right? And he gets married and brings her over. And the great aunt is a little besmirched by that, but this is really her only, nephew, her only family. So she doesn't let them fall into because she owns every piece of property in 4 counties, right? And so they have a nice house, and they have loads of kids. She had 8 brothers and sisters. So the aunt, whatever love she has, she starts to, give to those kids, right? She didn't have any kids of her own. And so she's, but she is not like spoiling them anything. My mom was her favorite. My mom was the oldest. She was the smartest. She was always Wilma. She never triple Capricorn and a lot in Virgo. So she was controlling her. And my great aunt was like sculpting my mom to take her place, right? To take over the empire, right?
Sure.
And so that happens. And there was a downturn before the Great Depression and before, just after, it was like a hiccup just before the Great Depression. And my mom was set to go to college. My mom was set to be a doctor and an executive and come back and take over my great aunt's empire, right? And so the hiccup comes, and my grand aunt she has loads of stock from all these old guys and a ton of real estate. And she owns 6 banks, so she has some liquidity, but not a lot. Then the depression comes, wipes out her stocks, which is like maybe half of her net worth. Still got all that real estate, still got enough money to be liquid enough to have a comfortable life and run her business. But it's a great depression.
Yeah.
So she can't send my mom to where she is. So she puts them in this factory where and she gets her a job being the guy who owns the factory, his assistant, right? And my mom is just a unbelievable knockoff of my great aunt. Really the prettiest girl. I mean, just right. And so my grand aunt can't get her to go to college and take over the empire.
She's just go like my mom was a knockoff of that,
right?
And she was super hot,
right?
And she was hot. I mean, like seriously, come on, dude.
Anyway,
your mom was hot.
Yeah,
so
she was. Everyone
So
said it.
tracks.
Everyone, every male was just like around her. Now, my
Well,
mom,
males are like that,
right?
aren't they?
And now that was not at all. My mom was my mom to me, and my mom. So we had a bunch. She had a bunch of kids only because she was Catholic. She
Mm.
really, really shouldn't have had children, but I was the one kid, so I was like off the shelf from her. So she didn't have to change my diaper. She didn't have to go through all this stuff. By the time I showed up, I was
Oh,
me,
yeah.
and she liked that. So we read. She was a big reader. We read
Who does
books.
not like that?
Right.
Who does wanna?
Right.
Yeah.
So I
Okay,
came out
yeah.
as, and so I accepted my parents for who they were. Where my brother, oh, I hate them, I hate them, and me, no, my dad had some really great things about him. I was all down
Mm.
on that. My mom, same thing.
Mm.
And my grandma explained everything, gave me the 411 of my family. So I was not,
Okay.
my brothers and sisters
Mm.
have no idea about who and what they are. Me, I got the full thing. When I was 6, my mom took us all up there to see where she came from and to meet our uncles and my aunts and all our cousins. And they had a ton of them, right?
Mm.
And so we
Mm.
went up there and we went to see my aunt, my great aunt, and she lived in this gigantic mausoleum of a house, a Gilded Age house. And it was full
Wow.
of stuff. I mean, she was a hoarder, but it was all amazing. I mean, my mom just threw it all away. She had, waited 20 years and put it on eBay. They would have made $1 billion. But anyway, I spent 4 summers every, instead of being in New York and it's hot and sweating and I'd get into trouble, they sent me up to spend 4 summers
Sorry.
with my great aunt. And she loved me because I looked just
Mhm.
like her twin brother.
Uh-oh.
Yes, all my brothers and sisters got the Italian, Irish thing. I got the German thing going. So I looked just like her twin brother. So she was like, "Oh my God." Now I'm 6 years old, so she can't really do anything about that.
Can you just
Ex-
pause it? Pause it. Don't do. I know that you're gonna go. We're gonna do, but this is
no. So I'm keep going. So did you ever see the movie? We're
Hold
sticking.
Hold on. That's that pop up. Nah, that's weird. That's just.
But that's
Stop
life, baby.
going
That's
there.
life. Come on, life is weird. I mean, if I were to like take you down memory lane of your life, you have shit in your life that is just as weird.
Of course, I hope so.
Yes.
Because I don't know. I mean, like we all shit. So
Yeah, exactly. So, and you can say that 89% of modern Anglo-Saxon white people can't say that. Can't talk about their shit. Except for the Germans. They have toilets where they have a little stage so their shit can land on it and they can look at it.
Effective.
Yeah. Anyway, so my grand aunt fell in love with me. Did you ever see the movie Pollyanna? The Disney Pollyanna? No, you didn't. So do you know the character Pollyanna? Really innocent and loving and sweet?
Pollyanna.
Right? That's Pollyanna, right? So that was me.
The thing is,
That was me. I had no hard edge of I hate that, type of thing. I still don't.
I hate that.
And so my aunt
I'm sorry.
put all of like 70 years of not of being mean and crotchety and not being able to open up her heart and give love to anything. Bingo, I got a waterfall of love from my great
She
aunt.
probably did, but she couldn't show it.
Right. And so
She didn't know.
So in these 4 counties, my uncle Leo was the sheriff and judge of 4 counties. And everyone loved him so much that they stopped voting. They said, "Oh yeah, Leo, yeah, he's it," because he never put anybody in jail. He just gave them a copy of the Constitution and said, "If I see you next time, if you don't know this, you're going to jail." And so and she put him in charge because she knew that the people, she was stressing everyone out so much that if they had a police force that was mean and did what police do today, she'd have a revolution. So every morning my great aunt and I would have breakfast. She had servants and they'd have to like weave their way through all the stuff in that house, and they'd have this nice breakfast on a veranda. and then we would walk about 4 blocks, and she would go into the bank, which she ran, and I would go, across the street to the police station and hang out with Uncle Leo. And so I had these two things going on, and everyone in those towns knew I was her great nephew. And after the first summer I was there, she so mellowed out on everyone that I would walk down Main Street of these little towns and people, here, Al, have an ice cream cone. Here, please stay another 3 weeks. Can't you stay until at least Christmas? And so they were always looking forward to when summer would come around and I would show up and she would mellow out. And so that was my, from 6 until 10 period I spent with her, and then she died. And
I'm so sorry.
so but I was the only person who saw her better side, except for maybe my mom. And I had a really good time with her. I made her laugh, right?
Can I ask you something?
What?
Is it the same person that took you to the movies and make you see everything, that all knowledge? And you did that over and over again? That's pretty awesome. That's pretty fucking fun.
Yeah, that was my father's mother.
I want to know about her.
Well, she was pretty amazing. So she was Sicilian. Yeah. She came from the islands, not from Sicily itself, but the islands. And if you know anything about that, those islands are full.
Yeah, I know that. I'm Albanian.
Right. Okay. So then you know
We've
that.
actually been there for a long time.
Right. So those guys aren't Italian. They're Celtic.
Forever.
They're Celtic. So my grandma had red hair and green eyes.
Yep.
That's why they're white Italians and not all dark-skinned Italians. And especially the Sicilians, there are a few of them. So that was my grandma, and she lived on this little island. And her parents were herbalists and medical people and shaman and they were bards. That's who they were. They were bards, right? And but they didn't have the Irish thing. They were like the Italian bards, and the Celts were everywhere. I mean, they were in North America, they were in Egypt, they were all over the place. They were your cousins. I mean, the Albanians were the same thing. They were that same crew.
Yeah, I know that. We've been there for a long time.
Right. Very similar
we
to
forgot everything.
The Albanians remind me.
Yeah.
Don't take this the wrong way because some people would, but Albanians are kind of like the Roma. You know how the Roma are everywhere?
Yeah, the thing is, that's like you not knowing everything, Bob.
Right.
That's where you're wrong. I'm sorry. Sometimes you can be wrong.
Well, that's why I said don't take it to heart.
I was wrong. I kind of thought shit about that, but you should look deeper.
Right. And if we play the tape back, you would hear me say.
We're like
they are kind of like the Roma. I didn't say they were the Roma. I said they were kind of like.
It's time to fuck you up.
Yes, I know you are.
I mean, people have been patient with Italians. It's just like, shut the fuck up.
Shut the fuck up, man.
Also, we're pretty much Greek. We're pretty much everything that used to be.
Yes, you are pretty much everything that used to be.
Do not start. Yeah. Before you know anything, you don't know everything.
Do I ever say I know everything? No. What do I normally say 5 or 6 times?
You say that shit again,
5 or 6 times a show, I say, don't believe a word I say, Yeah. Of course. I'm a griot. I just tell stories.
Italians. Let me go into Italians. What the fuck are you? Shallow?
No, I'm not Italian. I'm
No, I'm not done.
Right.
Sicilians are usually Albanians.
Right.
So let's talk about that.
Right.
And let's talk about the fact that Celtic is actually the Illyrian.
Yes.
Do you know anything about that? No, you don't. And I hear that you don't, and that's okay.
I know. I've heard of the Illyrians
for like 3 years now.
Well, go. So teach us. Dr. Alana, give us the 411 on the Illyrians. Give us the 411 on the Illyrians.
Well, do you have Google?